Thanks for joining me here this afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Secrest from Jamf Software, and I'm here to talk a little bit about some imaging workflows for upgrading machines from 10.6 to 10.7, new machines that are coming in and allowing your users to upgrade them themselves. So, as I mentioned, I'm the channel systems engineer for Jamf Software. Some of you might be familiar with me. I've worked in the Pennsylvania to Florida area for a while now. Transitioning roles within the company a little bit. So Taylor Wolf will be the new guy in the territory. If you need anything, he's outside hanging out by the coffee on the second floor. So to get started, just a little bit of the agenda for today. I'm looking at deployment strategies for Lion. Going to focus on the strategies, define those strategies, go through a quick technical demonstration, and a little bit of time for discussion. Actually, Taylor just walked in, so this is the guy Taylor. If you need anything, let him know. So real quick, just wanted to see who in the audience is currently using the Casper suite. Okay, so we get a good group. Are you guys using it for OS 10? OS 10? Okay. Any iOS users? Okay. Anybody using Deploy Studio in the room? Okay, cool. Managing desktops, laptops, everything. Okay, who's doing MacBook Airs? Okay, all right. That's been kind of a troublesome feat for everyone. There's NetBoot, but then you get restricted down to the 100 meg USB port. So we'll talk a little bit about some new stuff that we're doing for that with the latest release, and hopefully that will solve some of your temporary needs there. So real quick, there's 3 deployment scenarios that I want to go through. One is what happens when you get brand new devices. They show up at your loading dock. You've got, say, 100 devices there. How are you going to get those imaged? What's the workflow going to look like? And get those set up for your new users. The next is upgrading existing machines that you might have, existing managed machines, so devices that are managed, they're checking into the Casper suite, getting those upgraded to 10.7 from 10.6.8, ensuring that your machines meet the system requirements for the latest operating system. And then finally, looking at just taking your existing environment, wiping those out, doing kind of an erase and install, and getting those upgraded to 10.7. Some things to consider in the process are what are you going to do with your users' data during that period of time. So I'll open that one up for kind of other people to comment on what they're currently doing, whether they're using migration assistant, some terminal commands. I'd love to hear what people are doing for user data as well, because I think that's really important. So I'm going to start with deploying new Macs within your environment, kind of what that looks like, and going through that, we've got 3 primary tools within the Casper suite that we'll be using for this. One is the Composer application. With Composer, we'll create base operating system images, and we'll repackage all of our third-party applications, maybe some preference files and things. And at the end, I'll actually walk through what this looks like in Composer for those of you who haven't seen it. For those of you who have seen it, I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with it to make things easier. Now, once you've created these packages with Composer, you want to upload them into Casper Admin. The Casper Admin application is kind of your repository for packages, scripts, Adobe installers, your base operating system and things. So you'll store that through the Casper Admin interface. It's kind of like iTunes. It allows you to organize things based on stage, whether they're in testing stage, whether they're deployable, or fully ready for production. So a great tool for organizing things. It also allows you to create your imaging workflows. So this is where you would create what we call standard configurations and smart configurations. And as we go into these applications, you'll see more. But the standard configurations are essentially going to be the base configurations for a group of devices. So maybe you have a base configuration in your environment that has Mac OS 10. It has the 10.7.3 update, maybe Microsoft Office that everyone gets, and some additional applications like Firefox, Flip for Mac, Period, some of those different applications. We'll create that base configuration as a smart configure or as a standard configuration, And then the smart configuration would be unique to like departments or labs, or unique needs. Maybe faculty versus staff get a different configuration. So each of those smart configurations would contain things like Photoshop, or maybe the full Creative Suite, maybe Final Cut Studio, or whatever they're calling it these days. So we can create those configurations. You can have multiple base configurations and multiple smart configurations built off of each base. So really great way to organize things. Now, once we've created those organizational units, we're going to look at distributing the packages to different shares. So this is what we call kind of replication across your environment based on where your users are actually receiving the packages from. So, for example, if you're a school and you have, say, 32 different buildings, you might want to have a distribution point at each one of those sites to store the operating systems, all of your third-party packages, so that the computers at that local site are going to that distribution point to gather their packages and install them on the computers. Now, those distribution points can be AFP, they can be SMB. You can repurpose existing shares within your environment. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of Mac Minis or a bunch of new server hardware for each of those sites. So if you have 80 or 100 gigs on a share, you can repurpose that. And what you'll look at doing is just kind of replicating through rsync your packages to all of those shares. And then based off of the network segment that the user is on, they would report into the appropriate share and get those installers from there. Now, moving on to the Casper imaging application. Casper imaging is just going to be the tool that is used to actually lay the image down on a machine. So it would run, the Casper imaging application would run on a netboot image. It could run on a USB stick. It could run on a recovery partition. There's a variety of different ways to run this Casper imaging application. Essentially, it just needs to be running from a different partition than the target partition. When I say target partition, I mean the Mac OS or Macintosh HD drive that you're looking at installing on. So that's Casper imaging. I'll show you what the interface looks like that for in a few. But again, this is what Composer looks like. It's gotten a little facelift recently. But in here, we've got pre-installed software templates. So all these items that you see here are just kind of, they're templates for those applications so that you can reach into the operating system and pull those packages out. We've got a variety of templates. I'll walk through some of the different ones in a few. But this is also where we're creating our base operating system. Once we've created those, again, we're going to upload them. We're going to copy them into Casper Admin. And then we're going to create our configurations. The blue ones are the base configurations. The purple ones are the smart configurations I was mentioning. And then this is what Casper imaging looks like. On the left-hand side, we've got our full workflow. You can see it's starting with the base image, running down through the third-party applications, setting the name, updating host files, and preparing a first run script so that things are actually going to take place during the first run. Once it's done imaging, it's going to begin checking into the Casper suite on an ongoing basis. So typically every 15 minutes, it'll report in its IP address and say, hey, this is where I'm at. So it's kind of different than ARD. The device is reporting in versus the devices, versus ARD kind of scanning for the devices. So a different approach there. Looking at upgrading managed Macs from 10.6 to 10.7. What we want to do there is we're actually looking at using self-service, so kind of empowering the user to be able to do their own upgrade. The nice thing about this is that you're leaving the user's data in place and actually allowing them to run the OS X line installer on their local machines. So they're actually going to walk through the process of running this installer. Some of you might have attended the install-lion.pkg presentation yesterday. It's a similar concept to that. We're not really using the install lion PKG option. That is definitely an option. Here, I'm just going to focus on using the lion install.app that you would get from the App Store. So looking at that and what that would look like, these are some considerations to consider before upgrading the devices, you want to make sure they're running 10.6.8. Can't be 10.6.7 or anything. We want to look at what applications they have installed. If they have a PowerPC application before they upgrade to 10.7, you might want to make sure that they don't need that application because it's going to break it as soon as they do that upgrade. And Java is not built into 10.7, so you might want to add Java as an additional installation later on. Does anyone else have any good recommendations or key things to consider when doing an upgrade that I might not have mentioned here? Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yes.
If you have hidden your administrator account, Lion knows that account right when you create it.
Good point. Good point. Okay. Rich?
That can be done if your account is hidden, but the home folder is stored the users, but then they'll
Yep.
post both the records not be used for that main account.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll migrate that account successfully, but if it's outside of users, it's hidden, like stuff like user ID, we'll not migrate the records.
All right. Great advice. Thanks, guys. So there's some additional things to take into consideration. I was mentioning the end user will be involved. So what this kind of looks like in the workflow that you would have to go through as an admin to get this set up and get it prepared for the users, we want to actually start in the App Store. We want to start with getting the Lion installer. VPP makes this a little bit easier. You can get VPP codes for the number of devices that you're looking at upgrading. So maybe you've got 500 devices, you need to get 500 VPP codes, or if they're brand new devices, you might not have to worry about it. It might already have a license for Lion, but take that into consideration. Make sure you're licensed properly. Now, we want to repackage the Lion installer with the Composer application. It actually comes in the install.esd DMG format. We want to go in there, take that file, that app file out, and move it into a location that we can run it from. So a couple of different options for that location. Some people might use user shared. Some people might use a different framework file that we have called management tasks. So in library application support, management tasks, we have a .lion folder, and we just looked at placing that .app in here. So we're just taking the .app, packaging it up here so you can see it, and then looking at distributing that application down to the devices. So every Mac you would then distribute that application to that's available to run Lion. So one thing to take into consideration there is when you create a group and you look at distributing out this application, you want to ensure the application is fully there before trying to run it. So what we have here is an extension attribute. Everybody familiar with extension attributes? They're a customizable inventory field. So essentially we're running a small script here, a bash script, to collect the information about that app to make sure it's installed and fully there on the device, so it didn't get halfway installed. We'll get that reported back, create a smart group off of it so that we know that it is installed, that it's there. Once we have that smart group, we can look at creating a policy. One thing to consider when distributing this application down to the devices is that HTTP, it doesn't mount a share on the user's desktop, and it will reinitiate the download if someone closes their laptop and walks away. So it won't try and do a full download again. It will just reinitiate that download using HTTP. So we've got our devices grouped together. We want to trigger the policy to make this available in self-service for the user. So we can make it available in self-service, and we can pop up a notification for the user saying that it's available. Now, some people might have a different strategy for this. You might wait for a user to call the help desk and say, hey, I'd like to get Lion. But if you want to let your user know that it is available, you can go in here, send a notification to them. The notification will pop up on their home screen, on the main screen of the device, and prompt them to install the self-service application and then begin downloading that or installing it. So A couple of things to consider there are having a little bit of documentation and self-service for your users so that they can actually see what it would look like, the processes, the different steps, some of the options that are available. If you're using the install lion.pkg option, I believe that that chooses all of your options for you. So whether you want additional language support, things like that, that will walk through that. But it's nice to have a little bit of information for your users so they really understand what that looks like. And you can make those documents available in the JSS or in the self-service web page for them to see. So some things to consider once that install has run. Essentially, what that's going to look like for the user is they're going to get a pop-up window that's going to say, "Hey, please install Lion." It's going to run them through the setup assistant, reboot their computer, and they're going to set it up just like a brand new device. So things to consider at the end: policy to install Java. Remove the cached installer. So you want to go in and remove that .app piece. And make some interface changes as necessary. If you guys want to reinvert the scroll bars, make some adjustments to make the user environment a little bit easier. It becomes really easy with 10.7. So if you're already managing 10.7 devices, this will be pretty simple because the device will automatically fall into groups for preferences, configuration profiles, and things. If you're not managing them, I'd recommend setting these groups and policies up ahead of time so that as soon as the device is upgraded to 10.7, it's going to fall into the correct groups for login preferences at the login window. Have your disclaimer banner and things like that ready. So I'd recommend looking at that as well. Now, to deploy a custom configuration of 10.7 to managed Macs, we have some unique options here as well. Since the devices are checking in already, we can just kick off kind of an erase and install on the machine without the user being involved. You can do all this remotely. You can automate these installations, and we'll go through some of that in a few minutes. But it's essentially going to be the same tools. We're going to create our base image with Composer. We're going to upload it to Casper Admin. We're going to utilize the Casper imaging application to distribute that. But we can add in some custom scripting. And a couple of things to consider here are now we have a base OS and a recovery option as well. When we looked at the new machines, we would have the base OS laid down because we use the installer. When we looked at upgrading with self-service, that would automatically put the recovery partition in there because we ran the full installer. But here, since we're capturing a custom image, we also want to look at putting the recovery OS down at the same time because we're not running an installer. So we've got to be mindful. If we want that recovery partition for additional functionality, we need to put that in place. And there's some things to consider around that. So we would use Composer for the same, essentially the same process to capture our base operating system, but also to capture the recovery partition. One thing to consider here is we need to mount the recovery partition so that we can see it. So you can just use the disk util mount and mount the disk. It'll pop up and then you'll be able to see it in the Composer application. It'll make it visible for you so that you can then capture that operating system to be deployed. At the end, we'll look at unmounting that as kind of a post-install script. And these slides will be available so you guys can get those. If you guys are already on a computer and you go to Jamf Nation, Jamf Nation has this kind of workflow laid out in a knowledge base article for you. For those of you that are interested, it's jamfnation.com. Under the knowledge base articles, if you sort by most popular, this one will come up at the very top. So we want to look at taking those two operating systems that we now have, the custom configuration and the recovery partition, getting those into Casper Admin so that we can then deploy them out with the Casper imaging application. So we'll take those two. Casper Admin is very much a drag and drop application. You just drag it and drop it in there. You can customize it. I highly recommend putting in a description so you know what version you're running, what custom configurations are in there, and select that it's going to be a standard configuration. With the recovery partition, let's see. With the recovery partition, what we want to do is we want to install two configurations here, the journal HFS. The recovery partition size needs to be at least 1 gig. So we would select 1 gig there, or say 20% of the drive. Select our recovery partition for deployment, and that's going to be additional to the main configuration task. So we'll go in and put that in. Now, once we've put those two pieces together, we've got the Lion install and we've got the recovery partition install. As soon as we deploy those, we want our post-install scripts to run, which at the end it would unmount the drive so it wouldn't be visible anymore, and it would set the setup type for the disk to be Apple boot. That's required so it knows that it's a recovery partition and knows how to treat it, makes it invisible, and everything. So we want to be sure to set that. Some things to note, it's just the recovery OS and the script. Make sure you've got that in there. The base configuration and OS additional packages, kind of the full workflow. You want to make sure you've got everything built out and all your customizations in there. And I'll walk through some of this with my laptop and my different instances, and we could talk about how I've set things up and how you guys might want to set things up. Another thing to note is that we want to set the priority to 1 for these operating systems that they install first. If they install second or third, you can have problems. You want to get those operating systems down there first. So, and the scripts will be set to after, so that once the base operating systems are laid down, the scripts will run afterwards. And then we'll use Casper imaging again. So we come back into Casper imaging. We're going to select our target hard drives. We're going to erase those drives. We can name the devices. We select our base configuration, say we want to reboot the machine, and then we have the option to select a distribution point. If you guys have a kind of a staging area set up, maybe you guys use a cafeteria or something to image 500 devices, you can have a distribution point on that local network in that staging area that the packages will come directly from. So it'll streamline the process. You won't crush your network or be sending things over 100 meg pipe to buildings halfway across campus. And just to kind of wrap up this before I go into some of the technical demonstrations, we looked at deploying newly shipped Macs. As I mentioned, the newly shipped Macs, they're already going to have the recovery partition, so we only have to worry about laying down the operating system. So we're just wiping out the existing operating system and laying down a fresh operating system. Now, some people might take into consideration a different workflow than I've kind of laid out here, which is thin imaging. A lot of people are looking at setting up policies, setting up configurations on their JSS, and then they're just enrolling the device with the management server, and all of the policies are coming down afterwards. The idea here is that you have the base operating system, you have the recovery partition, so why are you going to go back through and wipe all that out just to transfer that over the network again down to all these devices? So you can leave that in place, give the user the device, and all the installations will start occurring afterwards, or optionally they can be available in self-service for the user to initiate those installations. So that's the new Macs. Looking at upgrading the existing Macs, how many people would let their users go to self-service and actually install their own? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. What are the concerns with letting your users do it on their own?
We had a user do it on his own, and he bought it yourself from Apple.
How do you blow it up? I mean, what sense? You don't know?
He started the line update and it killed the machine.
Yeah, we have like encryption and remove.
Okay.
And there's some other programs, so it's just faster to wipe them out.
Sure. So something to consider there, whether you have encryption, File Vault 2, Sophos, some of the other full disk encryption options, is decrypting that drive beforehand. Is anyone using like deep freeze? Deep freeze? You might have to thaw the machine before you can install your Lion. Yes.
We get our users, we get enough users who say, oh, well, 10.7 just came out in July. Why can't I just go ahead and deploy it? I did it at home. It worked perfectly for me at home. I have, you have network access controls on your system, on your network at home. You find your system to active directory, you do that. The environment in an enterprise is much more complex than your environment at home. So one that we did was we had to block the line install.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. We've seen a lot of people block the installer from running and automatically delete it, or some people are just blocking the App Store in general. Yes.
We had issues with we tried to cache the Lion installer.
Yep.
So it would take half an hour to download from the server. And I think the corruption, we had corruption on the caching issue. The backup was corrupt. And I think it was because we were closing the laptops in the middle of download, I think.
Yep.
They were verified what was causing it. It happened quite a few times.
Okay.
We ended up not being able to rely on it.
Really? Did you use AFP, SMB? Okay. Might consider using HTTP. That will have the persistent download. So if they close their laptop, it'll just reinitiate the connection. And, yeah.
So we ended up installing.
Okay. Yeah. It's.
Our one-to-one is 4 through 12 on 2 different campuses. And just, a half hour download when we were trying to test it. If we said, okay, open up your laptop, click this now.
Yep. That's a great point. So some things to take into consideration there are when these Lion installers are caching, because that's going to be the main bandwidth consumption is during that period of time. So built into the Casper Suite policies for caching, there are some scheduling options. So maybe you schedule one network segment to do it at this point in time during Friday evening when all the users are gone, and it will download cache those packages in the background, so you're not doing it kind of during peak hours. Definite good option for that. Did you have another question?
Well, you're asking about why
Yeah.
and I guess my question is, users not understanding, your point, understanding the ramifications of doing the upgrade and the time involved.
Yep. So yeah, that's kind of a user education piece. That's why I recommended having a document in there that kind of lays it out for them, so they see every stage of it, understand that maybe it's going to take 45 minutes for that process to run. But my big thing on allowing them to do it is that their data stays in place. You don't have to take it away from them. You don't have to use your time as an admin upgrading one individual machine. With the Lion installers, even the Snow Leopard installers were a lot more reliable in just upgrading the machine. I remember when I was doing the admin thing at National Geographic, I was going from 10.4 to 10.5, and we just blew everyone away every single time, migrated their data back. And it would take, depending on how much data they had, a long time. If you get someone with 400 gigs of data in an iMac or something, it's going to take a while to migrate that data off. Yes?
If you're going from 10.68 to 10.7 in this process and you have not, you're running one partition, there's no way to partition drive, right? With the recovery partition on there.
The Lion installer will automatically partition it.
Oh, it will?
Yeah, when the Lion installer runs. So we're...
All the other information.
Yeah, so this process is literally, it's using Apple's installer. We're just kind of kicking it off. Any tool out there can kind of do this same process. All you're doing is copying the file down and the end user is just running the file pretty much. So we're just kind of triggering that. So
You only get that for recovery partition if you're on software. Yeah, well,
it would fail out. Yeah, cool. Okay.
Is the recovery partition required
No,
partition?
no, but if you want to use, I think File Vault, it's required. If you want to use some of the remote command functionalities, like there's remote lock, remote wipe functionalities now, I think it's required for that as well. Back to Mac and iCloud are required for Find My Mac is required for it. Okay, so yeah, if you don't need those services, you might not lay it down. The other option is we're looking here at Apple's recovery partition. There's no reason you can't make your own unique recovery partition and put it down. So you could build out a base operating system that is very similar, that has your utilities in it, like Casper Imaging has maybe Casper Admin or Composer or Disk Utility, some of those other things you might want to have if you as an admin come to the machine, want to boot up to an external drive. You could have Disk Warrior, all those different tools there, and lay it down in the exact same manner. We're just focusing here on laying down Apple's recovery partition. Yes?
He made the decision to delete the recovery partition. He didn't want to put it into a change of password.
Yep.
Blocking firmware.
Mhm.
I don't want to.
Good point.
We delete.
Have you considered putting down your own unique recovery partition?
We might.
Okay.
Then I could password block with my own credentials.
Yeah.
We may.
Okay. Yeah, something to consider. Another option.
How are you servicing it then? Just with the disk?
Yeah. Yes, we will. Or network, I have a tool for network volume.
Cool. Okay, so the last deployment scenario was just erasing and re-imaging the machines, laying down that dual configuration. So those are kind of the three workflows I wanted to go through. As I mentioned, this is highlighted on Jamf Nation in an article. If you guys haven't seen Jamf Nation, it's pretty great. The idea behind Jamf Nation is that it's a community site for members of the community to talk with each other, share ideas. At the same time, for us to be able to get a little bit of insight into some of the problems you're having. Maybe see if there's features that people are interested in. We've got a polling functionality in there, so we can see what features people are requesting. You guys can vote those up and down as you're interested in them. And knowledge base is out here, as well as a third-party product section, which is really cool. And what's going on there is we're keeping track of the different versions, the download links, and specific information about these applications. If you look on the left-hand side here, there's discussions, there's articles, extension attributes, those custom inventory pieces. We've got package manifests, the package templates. So you guys can share your scripts and templates and things out here, so that if one of you creates something for Composer, you can share it and everyone can use it. So Jamf Nation, really useful. And then we have a nice little portal. So that's kind of the end of my slide deck. I want to jump over and show you guys some of these imaging workflows and actually what these tools look like and how I use them, and hear a little bit about how you guys might use them. So let's see. Hold on a second. So just to jump into Composer, because this is one of the most important applications. Let's see, where'd Composer go? Doesn't want to come up. Okay. Now, so there is an additional set of applications in here that are kind of set up on the machine. Composer is the primary one that we'll be using for imaging and creating those packages. So to run through this real quick, on the left-hand side up at the top, we have our sources. This is looking at just to step back for a second. What Composer is doing is it's looking at the file system of the local computer, and then it's extracting files out of the system. So the sources are the files that you're extracting out of the system for specific applications. say it's Microsoft Office, say it's Flip for Mac, Firefox. In this case, I have Dropbox and Firefox, and we're listing those out. So I might have some library information. I might have some user data in here, and I can capture all that and send it out to the user. So just to create a new one and show you guys what that looks like, I'll start with the operating system ones. A little slow here today. I think I'm hogging up my system with this screen sharing thing I got going on. Let's see. Is not happy today. Sorry about that, guys. Let me see if I can get this to work. Otherwise, I'll jump over to this other machine and show you what it looks like. No. Doesn't like to build the OS. Interesting. This worked earlier. I apologize. Sorry. That's what you get when you do technical demonstrations. Let's see. The demo gods aren't happy with me today. Let's see if we can try and do something besides an OS. So just to highlight what happens when you build an OS package is essentially the hard drive shows up there. Yeah, it's not happy about something. The hard drive would show up here and you would capture that base hard drive. Let me just, that is going to bug me. Yeah. Otherwise, I can do it down here. Get that one going. So we have two. Okay. Watch. Nope, not happy again. Something's going on with that. So I'll just switch over real quick. Kind of wanted to get this other machine up here anyways. So let me switch over to this one, and we can work through some of this here. Okay. Side. So I've got I run a local JSS on my system, and there we go. Okay, so the idea is when I click on operating system, I would see any hard drives that are mapped up. So if I have a Macintosh HD in target disk mode connected to this, I'm going to see that machine map up here and be able to capture it. When I look at pre-installed software, on this machine, it's a fresh, clean system. Actually, I think it's running server, so it doesn't have a lot on it, but all the different items that I would have installed would show up in this list here. On my other machine, it's full of garbage, so the list would really build out. But to look and see what is going to show up if I do have it installed, we have the not installed section. So you can see we've got all sorts of tools here: Adobe Acrobat, Admit Mac, CS4, CS5, Shockwave, Cisco. You can come in here and list this out. And look through the list and share templates with each other. So this really streamlines package making to build out your modular images. So just to run down that list a little further, pretty much everything you can think of is in there. We also have user environment settings. So we can customize things like the desktop pattern, the dock icons, login items, whatever you want to set up for the user, and then be able to distribute those out to the systems. Now, if for some reason you have an application that is not in the list, you can't find it on Jamf Nation, we've got a snapshot mechanism. Essentially what this does is it takes a snapshot of the operating system in its current state. You would then deploy your software or make a change, and then take another snapshot and see what the differences in those two snapshots are. And build a package out of that. So that's kind of the snapshot mechanism. It's actually really useful for just basic troubleshooting. You can go in and make a change, do your snapshots, and identify kind of files,plists that are causing problems for you. So I really like it for troubleshooting. Jumping into the Casper admin application. This is where we would drop in all of our packages. So to kind of show you what this would look like, if I want to do Flash, I would hit continue, and you would see I've got library data for Flash. I've got user data as well. Now, one thing to consider with user data is how we're going to distribute that user content. We've got two options up at the very top. One is to build as a DMG, and the other is to build as a PKG. The DMG actually allows you to flag that user data and drop that into either the user template, so all new users would then get that user-specific content, or you could drop it into all existing users on the computer. The nice thing about the DMG option is it's using the knowledge, the functionality built into the Casper suite to distribute this content to the machine, versus using the installer app to distribute the package. So we have some unique capabilities outside of the installer app. The installer app is great. You can take a lot of things that are packaged like Microsoft Office and redistribute that without having to repackage it using the PKG format. Just note that when you get like Firefox and it comes in a DMG format, that's not the same as creating one of these. It's not deployable. You've got to repackage that. So that's Composer. Once we've built those packages, we'll just drop them in here into Casper Admin, and they'll show up here. And this is where we would look at doing things like categorizing. So if it's a script, we can categorize a script, a package, a printer, directory binding, doc icon. We can categorize it based off of its stage. So if it's in testing, if it's deployable, if it's non-deployable, or you can just kind of leave it in the all stages category and see them all. And then we can categorize things. The nice thing about the categories is that's going to be, it's going to show the categories in self-service. So when your users go to install things, if you have a base operating system set up as a category for images, your users would then click on images and install that configuration. I was talking earlier about the configurations here. I've got one base configuration. I've got a lot more on my other machine. Let me see if I can get this to map up to that. Make sure this is on. One second here. This one's got just so much more content to show. Okay, so the way these applications work is they can search for different sets of content based off the IP address. So in this case, I'm going to connect to my other machine, 2.20, 10.6. The demo gods aren't going to like me on this one, but we'll see what happens. I'm using my iPhone here as my network hub, which is why my network's a little bit slow. Yeah, no, it's not going to find that. Okay. Well, let me do another switchback, guys, if you don't mind. Take just 1 second. I want to show something with this in just a minute. We've done some cool stuff with the MacBook Airs, but I'm going to get through the workflows so you guys can see what those look like. See if Casper Admin comes up. Okay, so what's happening here is the Casper Admin application is mounting my local share, which should show up as distribution here. As soon as that shows up, we'll see my full Casper Admin with all my scripts and things like that built in there. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Anything goes? Yes? No, it's just how big your share is. So you're essentially just storing them on a server share that it needs to be able to access. Okay, so this is what a more built-out Casper admin looks like. This might look more familiar to some of you guys that have configurations already laid out in your environment. But as I mentioned, we've got the types, the stages, and the categories. I've gotten pretty granular with my categories, looking at things like backup tools, antivirus tools, disk encryption tools, and really laid those out. Now, what we're looking at is all items right now. So you see a large number of items, and they're all kind of mixed together. We can go in and specify we only want to see packages. In that case, let's see. Looking at some of the packages I have, we've got some different items that are pretty important here. The priority column decides when that package is going to be installed during the installation process. So if it's an OS installer, we want to make sure it's a 1. If it's an OS update, it probably needs to be a 2 because you want that to happen in order. I like to break things out in the specific priorities. So it's OSs and then OS specific items being 1 through 10. And then I like to go third-party applications being 10 and above. And then at the very end have things like full disk encryption, antivirus, being the final priority so that those things happen at the very end so they don't conflict with installations of other applications. Now, we've got the FUT and FEU here. This is the fill user templates and fill existing users with user-specific content from Composer. So if you're deploying Microsoft Office, you might want to have the file that goes into the documents folder that has all their different configurations, languages, and things. If you're deploying Firefox, you might want to deploy bookmarks to the user template, but you might not want to deploy bookmarks to all existing users on the machine, because then you might wipe out some people's bookmarks and have unhappy users. But that's kind of packages here. As I mentioned earlier, looking at the different configurations. This is our base configuration at Jamf. So we've got 10.7 installers, updates, third-party applications, going down the list. Say we have a design department, and they would need unique items. We can easily see what unique items are in that configuration. Now, this is very easily updatable. So as you see in the repository, I have one installer for Skype. If I go out and I update that with Composer and I drop that installer back in and it's named Skype, it's going to update all the different configuration workflows. So you don't have to manually go in and update each workflow. That's the benefit of kind of taking this very modular approach to imaging. So that's Casper Admin. To jump over and look at the Casper imaging application, let me I'm going to show you guys what we can do with Casper imaging. It's pretty cool. We've done some great stuff with the MacBook Airs recently. I believe John DeTroy might have talked a little bit about it in his presentation earlier. Let's see. Did anybody sit in on John's presentation earlier? Did you talk about imaging MacBook Airs? Okay. All right. Cool. So, let me see. You do it faster than I can open some of these applications, that's for sure. All right, so we've got a camera here set up to show the screen. And it's not happy with me either. Oh, it's not plugged in. Okay. Come on. All right. Okay, so this is the Casper imaging application. It might look familiar to some of you. We've got kind of our basic configurations laid out here. Now, what we're doing here is selecting a target hard drive, saying we want to essentially erase the boot volume That's my primary. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to target disk this computer so it'll show up in the list here. And it should show up in a second. Oh. Okay. Too many passwords. Okay, so the second Macintosh HD is going to show up in the list, and we would have our standard options for imaging this device. We would select our target drive, erase it, we can rename it, and at that point pick our configuration, what distribution point we want to work with, and things. We recently added in 8.5 a new feature called Target Mode Imaging. Target Mode Imaging is great for the airs specifically because you've got a Thunderbolt cable and you've got SSD drives. Thunderbolt is really fast and SSDs are fast. When you get to doing the 5700 speed drives and stuff, you're not going to save a lot of time. You might save a little bit of time, but at that point you could stick with NetBoot, software update kind of server to facilitate those deployments. But specifically to airs, this is really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase the target drive. I'm going to install a base operating system, which is 4.31 gigs, so it's just the operating system. I don't have anything additional on it at this point. Oh. Let's see. There we go. Now it won't go to sleep. Okay, so we're going to select the base operating system, and we're going to tell it to start. Anybody got a stopwatch? Ready? Connect. Doesn't see it. Come on. Connected. Hang on. For some reason it doesn't see it. So this can do any devices that are connected. Man, this so worked earlier. Come on. Come on. Oh, man. All right. Gee. Let's see. Target mode, prompt, base. It's not mounted. Let's see. The idea is that you can connect them as fast as you can, and when it connects, it should just automatically image.
Would it just keep going then as you connect to the next one?
Yeah.
You only set it once. You set this workflow, and as it connects the next one, you connect the next one, you connect the next one.
Yep. So as fast as you can connect them, it'll go. But for some reason, it doesn't want to go. I'm going to get this. This is going to bug me. All right, hang on. Promise this worked earlier. It was really slick. Let's see. Okay. Target. Okay, so this is in target. I'm going to connect this. It does not want to mount. All right. Sorry, I'm going to reboot this one. Yeah, it'll boot fast. Let me reboot the primary and get this resolved real quick. Sorry about this, guys. Okay.
With the putting things in the user template,
Yes.
In one of the talks yesterday, somebody mentioned that they had put something in there, and then Apple decided to make a change to the template, user template, and wiped out.
I wiped it out. So I guess in that case, you would just look at redeploying the content to the user template. When it comes to the Apple template, I would only recommend blowing it out if you need to.
Well, I didn't know if in
Casper,
Casper's
like a trigger or something where it watched that. Keep it up to date with your content.
right. Well, I know Casper has the fill user templates and fill existing users templates. Or fill existing users. I didn't know if that was something that they refresh. Like the next time the policy was applied, they would look at the.
You could always tell it to refresh it, but no, it's not automatically going to refresh it. You would have to have like an extension attribute reporting on its status and refresh based off of that. All right. And let's see that. Okay, so I've got it back up, and it sees it. Get the two drives. Target mode, prompt, erase. All right, stopwatch. Yep. It's not going to see it. Come on. Taylor, why is it not seeing it? It always sees it. Huh? Okay. It does.
The answer is here.
Now it won't see it. Fail. Well, I'll tweak it, and if you guys want to see it out in the hallway, essentially it takes a minute and 40 seconds or less to lay down a 4 gig image. This so worked earlier. I'm just bummed that it's not working. That's killing me. You know? So I won't waste any more time on this, but are there any questions? Does anybody have any comments that they'd like to go through, workflows they'd like to talk about for line deployments? Yes.
Currently we're using the Toy Studio, but
Okay.
thinking about convincing them to escape Composer.
Okay.
And see, once the package is made in Composer, I should be able to just push it through ARD, right? Make any changes, or?
You would just want to build them as PKGs versus building them as DMGs, but no, you don't have to make any. Composer is a great kind of introductory tool to the Casper suite. So to get your feet wet and see if it fits your needs and kind of what you're interested in. And all those templates are available for use on Jamf Nation. So they call them package manifests on Jamf Nation. But if you search for just a software title on here, so you go to third-party products, and that's not going to load either. But if you go to third-party products on there, you'll be able to select the different software titles based off of A, B, C, D, kind of their main title name, and select that and go in and drill in, and you'll see the different package manifests. So, for example, CS5, we don't have any package manifests yet. I think actually most people are using the native installers these days. They found Adobe's started to get a little bit better. To where they're manageable. What's that? Yep. Yeah, so it's a first run setup. Yeah, because it requires, the Adobe installers actually require an Adobe account. It builds a temporary account and wipes it out, but Adobe's a unique one. Yes?
How do you handle the App Store, Mac App Store apps, and the volume licensing and other kinds of things to
Yep, so
apps?
Yeah, the Mac App Store volume licensing only works for Apple-specific applications at this point in time. So we don't have any real tight integration with it specifically. But I would just go through and buy the number of seats that you need and report on them through the Casper Suite. So the Casper Suite allows you to do software license tracking. With the software license tracking, you can identify usage as well. So you can see we've got Final Cut, the new version of Final Cut installed. We've got 30 codes for it, but we have 40 installations. You can go in and monitor whether those devices are actually using the product, and then create a group out of that and remove the application from those devices if needed, or purchase additional licenses.
So are you
Yes.
just doing snapshots then to do the install, or how are you tracking those?
Oh, do you mean to create the package?
Right.
You would just
For
use.
the, because it seems like it's tied to an Apple ID, or that doesn't apply for.
You would just repackage it up with the Casper Composer application. So just like you would create a package for Microsoft Office, you would come in and create that package as well. Is that?
So the Apple ID doesn't come into play for the Apple?
No, not yet. At some point, it could be very similar to iOS problems. Very similar to iOS problems. But we'll see what that looks like in the future. Did you have a comment, Rich?
Yeah, I want to know if they're running Fortnite setup upgrades. I want to know if they're running out disadvantages using the apps process over, say, using traditional install box.
We're just using the .app file, so we're kind of sticking with Apple's process for upgrading machines, kind of in the consumer space. I definitely feel install lion.pkg is a good option. I don't know enough about it to really comment on that. I learned about it yesterday in the sessions. Yes.
We're deployed to your shop. Something we really enjoy is the deployed studio network builder that really builds that stripped down image that jumps right into the runtime, doesn't give you the finder, just lets it think. Is there any way you could try to customize the netboot image to be that sort of
Sure.
automated and pointed that it's just
So, yes, I'll say that, yes, but it's going to require you to create a custom netboot image. Essentially, when it comes to netboot, all we're doing is creating an image that has auto login and auto launches the Casper imaging application. So whatever you want to go in and strip out of that image before you upload it to your netboot server, you can go in and strip kind of the image down as much as you can. But to be honest, the way netboot works, it's not, if it's a 10 gig image, it's not loading all 10 gigs to run the client machine. It's only loading the boot files to launch it. So
bandwidth is married.
okay.
We have student workers do this.
Mm-hmm.
So having something that comes up and kind of in like for dummies mode is
Simple Finder, auto launch, Casper imaging.
yeah, just without a lot of other things to get in the way is a great advantage. So
Mm-hmm.
We have our student workers do it. They use NetBoot, put in their username and password, select the department of the machine, where the machine is going to go to, hit go, and that's it. And then they just take the next one off the shelf.
Yeah.
so they don't have a whole
Is anybody using the NetBoot software update server appliance that was put out recently? One? Two? So I don't know if you guys all... What's that? What are you using it for? A software update service? Okay. Yep. So just in case anyone hasn't heard, there's a NetBoot software update server appliance on Jamf Nation that is free. It's essentially Reposado that we did a facelift on, put it back out there for the open source community to support. So if you guys are familiar with that, it's just a virtual Linux appliance that you would download, upload to your virtual instances at your office, and then it avoids kind of putting the Mac Mini in the data center. We found that was a common concern for our customers, so hopefully you guys will find that useful as well. Yes?
You set it up where after you're done imaging, it'll give the user like a first initial turn-on experience where it's like
The setup assistant?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend setting that up when you create your base image. So you create your base image and just capture that, so it'll launch to the setup assistant. You can capture like a brand new machine out of a box. You just take a machine out of a box, put it in target disk mode immediately, and capture it in that form. So it's kind of like a never booted machine. But there's also, it's called the setup assistant. You can go in and forget what you have to do to it. You just kind of refresh that piece. It's just a script. It says setup assistant done is the way you Apple setup done, but doesn't that VarDB, Apple setup done? Yep. And then it'll give them that fresh new user experience. Yes.
I still have two questions, but the first one was like, if you like have a machine that's managed by Casper, and then you erase and reinstall it, is it real? I mean, obviously you have the Casper flag in your image. Is it like rejoin its old computer record in Casper to know what it's supposed to have already, or do you have to create like that again?
It will rejoin based off of the MAC address. Yep. So it'll automatically join that same inventory record and get whatever policies are available to it through that. The one cautionary thing I would say is if they are MacBook Airs, those Ethernet dongles are MAC addresses, as well as the new Thunderbolt displays have MAC addresses. So you need to go into the interface and label those as removable MAC addresses. So if one user brings it and connects it to the display, and another user does, they don't merge their inventory records. There is an outstanding feature request in on Jamf Nation. I'd recommend upvoting it. I've upvoted it. but yeah.
What were they using?
I think, is it serial number? I think so. I think it's serial number. Yeah. Yes.
I was also going to ask about distribution points.
Sure.
How do clients determine what distribution point they talk to?
So, a couple of different ways. You can set up buildings and departments as locations based off of subnets, and that's kind of the ideal way, is for a device to check in based off of its IP segment. So it's kind of like location aware, and it will reach out to the local distribution point, pull packages from there. We can work with a few different ways. You can set up policies to go to individual distribution points, so there's like override options. But I recommend doing the network segments if you can. The API allows network segments to be imported, so you can import a large list of network segments. But again, some people don't have their network segments mapped out perfectly. So, yes. Future. Okay.
So, jumping to mountain line.
Yep.
Installs, so we want to automate a lot of mountain line installs, we have file enabled, which requires password actually some user interaction in some service, something like that. I mean, kind of jumping ahead here, but I'm wondering what happens.
So what I would look at doing, and Rich could probably comment on this a little better than I can, but look at disabling File Vault through a script and having an extension attribute report on its status before you make the line or mountain line installers available to them. But I would focus on making sure it is disabled, and then having a smart group that says, yes, it's disabled, yes, it meets the system requirements, yes, then those installers are available, as well as if they have the encryption enabled, you could create a group that says they can't launch this application, which is the line installer, which would be a good option. That sound about right with File Vault, Rich?
Yeah, for file, I mean, you can upgrade file vault one encrypted machines. It's real expensive fetch.
Mhm.
Yeah, you've got file vault turned on, and this is for maybe down the road, 10 cents. You can definitely set up, there's inventory options in Casper already, it's built in for file vault to detect whether or not it's on.
Yep.
And I also have my GitHub repo, a
Desktop Jam Nation does better. The one on Jam Nation may not be the most current copy, the most current copy is number one.
Cool.
That would be at github.com/archive.
Thank you. Yes.
Thunderbolt demo you did, how long would that actually take on like a normal microphone drive?
A non-SSD drive, it depends on how large the files are, but essentially as fast as you can write to the drive. That's pretty much as fast as. So if you tried to do a Finder file transfer over Thunderbolt, that's about what you're going to get. So there is a little bit of overhead with the target connection, the target mode connection that reduces the speed a hair, but it's the best we got at the moment. So I think it's pretty fast. Any other questions? Well, it's about lunchtime, guys. 12 o'clock on the nose. So.